Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. We appreciate you checking in with us. My name is Jacob, and with me is my brother Justin. And today we thought we'd talk a little bit about the Super Nintendo. Now, while we're on this topic, I thought of something, Justin. What system, if you had to pick one system and that's all you could have, your desert island system. Now, forget that the virtual console or Game Pass, anything, forget those things exist and just think about the games for the system.
Forgotten.
What system would you take with you to a desert island?
It's a difficult question. It's a very difficult question. I don't know. I think I might need more time to think about it, but it's really rough because I'm going to give you top three right away. And that's probably either the PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, or the Super NES. But I don't know. I want to also even throw in the Nintendo 64, but I think there's just too few games on the 64. Even though a few of my favorites are there, there's too few. And it's probably, it's really strong Super NES or one of the two PlayStations. But I mean, if you're going to talk from a nostalgia standpoint, it's going to be the Super NES. And it's probably the same for you, only because, one, nostalgia also, like we just said, is a powerful thing, and that's what we grew up with. But also, I don't know. I mean, there's just so many of my favorite games on the Super NES, or some of the games that I think are the best out of a lot of our favorite series, So anyway,
absolutely.
I don't know. I can't lose whichever system I take, to be honest.
No,
but
not at all. Well, the reason I brought it up, obviously, was because today we're going to talk about the Super Nintendo. And I think I would put the Super Nintendo up there. I've said that a lot over the years. Right now, to honest to goodness, I would put the Switch up there pretty high these days. I think some of the best games for the Switch are some of the best games ever. Mario Odyssey is the best Mario game. Breath of the Wild is probably the best Zelda game, I think.
Might have to revisit that on the Mario Odyssey comment.
Oh, I love but I've always said the Super Nintendo, because like you said, so many of our favorite games. And I agree with you on the Nintendo 64 and with the PlayStation 1, but I also have to say a lot of those games didn't age as gracefully. Like in our head, they're so great, but when you go back and try to play Tomb Raider or Crash Bandicoot or lots of games on the N64, it's just, man, it's rough. It's rough. It's hard to go backwards.
Yeah, some of them.
I think as the indie scene has shown us, the 16-bit graphics hold up very well. And it's very easy to go back to them. And yes, when we think about all the games that we're probably going to mention here during today's show, I don't know, man. I think Super Nintendo would be the top contender for the desert island.
It's up there. It's up there for sure. Like I said, if I woke up on the desert island and after I freaked out that I was alone on a desert island, if the Super NES was the one sitting there, I probably wouldn't cry. So before we jump into any of our topic, let's go ahead and just say thanks to everybody, because our last video, we had a lot of comments from our friends that watch or whatever. So we appreciate you guys watching, and we appreciate you commenting. And don't stop now. Keep commenting.
That's right.
Keep watching.
Like, subscribe, ring the bell. I need a bell. Ring the bell.
No, you don't need a bell.
But yes, absolutely. Because without you guys, we're just talking to the air. We're talking to no one.
Well, we're talking to each other.
Yeah,
we can do that. We do that off the air. Okay, so you jump in. You jump in first because, I have a specific memory that's like the super earliest part of this whole Super NES thing. So, actually, let me just go ahead and say, yes, like Jacob said, we're talking about the Super Nintendo, right? Super Nintendo Entertainment System in full name, SNES, or as most people affectionately called it, Super Nintendo, right? So I'm sure we'll just refer to it as Super Nintendo from here on out. But you jump in, tell us about the Super Nintendo.
So Super Nintendo came out in August for North America, I believe. August 23rd, looks like, according to Wikipedia. And we all know Wikipedia is never wrong. So right. August 23rd, 1991. And we got it for Christmas. I had asked for it. I remember our friend Heath, he got it in like October time frame. And I don't know why, because his birthday's in April or May. His birthday's in May. And it wasn't Christmas yet, but I was spending the night at his house and I was sleeping on the couch. And in the middle of the night, I just kind of turned this right and I looked, and there was a blanket underneath the coffee table, and underneath that blanket, there was a corner of a box. And I was like, "What is that?" And I lifted up the blanket, and it was the Super Nintendo, you know?
Creeper. So the note
Yeah.
is
And so I
Jacob
was like,
snuck around your
"Oh."
house. Sure.
Right.
It's funny because I have a weird memory of sleeping at Heath's house for some reason, like staying the night there. Our parents must have been out of town or something, and I stayed with you at Heath. And I remember seeing like a Nintendo system under a coffee table. Am I making that up in my head? Like, am I Bogarting your
Well,
memory
o
or something?
or am I getting yours?
Are you still in my memory?
Well, here's the thing. You're right, and I don't remember why. No, I mean, you're right. You stayed at Debbie's house with me. Why did you? That's the question. I don't remember that.
What
But
are you doing here?
now that you say that, I think I stole your memory. I think I was
Maybe
in
you
Heath's
did.
bedroom or in the guest room, and you were on the couch because where else were you going to sleep? And you saw it.
Maybe.
I think so. I think
Memory
so.
stealer. So
I've stole
correction
your
of the memory.
I've stole your
I'm the
memory.
creeper that looks through your under your coffee table. The question is, why would you hide a gift directly under a coffee table in the middle of like the living room
Well,
under a
let's be
blanket?
fair. Heath was like,
Didn't go
the
looking.
perfect child. He wasn't going looking for anything, so I don't know. I don't
Get
remember.
out of here.
Did he get it the next day? I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't
Yeah.
remember. You know, I don't remember. But the Super Nintendo, like I said, we got it for Christmas. Now we were super excited for it. We knew it was coming. It wasn't a surprise. The Nintendo entertainment system we kind of discovered, organically, if that's a word you're going to use. I don't know, but the point is, you heard about it in a magazine, or you went to your friend's house and you said, "Oh, look at this thing I have this Nintendo." But the Super Nintendo, we knew was coming. I remember pictures in Nintendo Power and Electronic Gaming Monthly. And I don't know if you remember this. One of my favorite memories is there was a television commercial that was coming on TV. And
That's the memory I was going to talk about
yeah,
that I remember.
so I recorded it. I recorded this commercial, and when my mom came home from work, I made her watch it, and I
On
was
a
like, "I have to
VHS.
have this." Yes, on VHS. I have to have this game, Super Mario World and the Super Nintendo. Have to have it. I
And the
want it.
commercial was only about Super Mario from what I remember, or did it show other games? I only remember Super Mario.
I
I
don't
have like
remember.
a distinct image of him like running through one of the castles and like jumping through the stuff on the
with his
commercial.
cape on. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know that there was anything else on it. So, now I do remember, along with that. So there was an issue of Nintendo Power about it coming, and it had pictures of some of the games that were coming, and we were excited about several of those games, and Mario was one of them. But he had Mario was jumping in just a way that he was falling, and his cape was behind his head, and it kind of looked like a hat. And this is before anybody got to play it. And so the game magazine people were like, "Oh, is this a new power up? This golden hat that Mario has on?" But it was just the cape, just in such a way, So I remember talking about that with the kids at school. It's like, "Oh, it looks like he wears a hat or something," which is kind of funny.
He
We even
already wears
thought
a
that
hat.
well, he does, but it's also funny thinking about ahead to Mario Odyssey, and you used your hat as a weapon and everything, and all that. But so yeah, we were super excited to get it. We wanted it. We asked for it for Christmas, and lo and behold, we did get it for Christmas, which was awesome. Now I remember Mom told us, That's it." It was. I think it was $200. Does Wikipedia say what it cost?
I'm sure it does somewhere if we
Uh,
did our research.
yeah, it was like two. I'm pretty sure it was 199, which, as we've talked before, was a lot of money
Yes.
back then.
I have
So
confirmed with Wikipedia.
yeah.
199.
So
With the game though and two controllers.
yes, right. Right. We still had that back then. For those young people that could be listening to us, there you go. It came with two controllers and a game. So you get to play right off the bat. So Mom had said that's all you're getting. You're not getting anything else. It's a lot of money. Of course, she always said that. We always got something else. We also got Castlevania 4,
Oh,
which was a great game.
wait a minute. Is it called
Yeah.
Castlevania 4 or is it called
Super.
Super Castlevania?
Yeah. Super Castlevania 4.
So that's one of the things I was going to bring up about Nintendo. It's funny to me because Super Mario Brothers. I mean, first of all, they seem to have an obsession with the name Super, right? Although, as some of you may not know, if I believe I'm right, the Mario Brothers were first introduced in like their own other game. There's a game just called Mario Brothers where I don't know, it's like the one screen pipe game where the Koopas are coming out and stuff like that. So Super Mario Brothers was the one on the NES, right? But then yes, then when the Super Nintendo launched, then we had what, Super Castlevania, Super Mario, Super Metroid. I'm surprised it wasn't Super Link, Super Zelda, whatever. And then they carried that on the Nintendo 64. Every game just had 64 at the end of it. There wasn't 63 of them before that. We just had to call it 64. Luckily, that dropped off later. They didn't have cubed everything on the GameCube.
No, but we
right?
had a lot of games like new Super Mario Brothers Wii.
That's true. There was a lot of Wii names in there.
Well, and they were going to do that before, when the N64. So first it was, the code name was Project Reality, I believe, but then it was called the Ultra 64. And it we already had a release date and stuff, I think. And they were calling like some of the preview games like Ultra Mario and Ultra Link and stuff. So,
those are terrible names. I don't know if that's something that's like lost in translation, like between Japan and America or something like that, as a reason that those names are terrible. Because Japan, I complain about this still. Like if my buddy John is watching, him and I talk about this all the time. Like some some Japanese names for games are ridiculous. Like it just boggles my mind how they like think about the Squaresoft games. What is it? Kingdom Hearts. Some of the games, I've never even played any of them, but some of the names in the Kingdom Hearts series is like Kingdom Hearts Unchained Memories 2.5 or something like that. And it's like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
It doesn't mean anything. Anyway, I'm on a rant.
Well, let's remember, the original Mario 2, our Mario 2 was not a Mario game.
Right.
It was a different game in Japan. It was called Doki Doki Panic.
Doki Panic. Yeah, I know, which I don't know what that means.
Doki Doki is Doki Doki is an automatopoeic sound that they say is like for the sound of your heart. And so it's supposed to be like nervous. So it's like nervous panic.
Okay. So I don't I knew that factoid, but I don't know if I've ever looked up like the original Doki Doki. So what, they just swapped the characters out and that's it? Like
they did swap the characters and they were Arabian themed characters. Also, there could be some kind of tie into like a game show, I think, but I'm not 100% positive on that, but I feel like there was. But one thing was different, I think you had to beat each level with every character to complete the game. Yeah.
But the question is, did they have as many characters though? Because we had
four characters.
Okay. Yeah.
So you'd have to play level 1 4 times.
That sounds really stupid.
Now I could be remembering that wrong. And like I said, in the future, when we dream about all these fans we have, someone in the comments is going to go, "You're stupid." But I'm pretty sure that's what it was.
We may do real research, but we got like jobs and stuff, guys.
Jobs, family. We just talk about this stuff all day if we could.
Let's just get the system itself out of the way, right? It's better than a Nintendo. It's got better graphics. It's got better sound. It's got, it's more powerful, right? That's the great thing. And like, oh, there we go. Yeah, show it. Oh, it's not very yellow. Expected it to be yellow. Is that the classic one or something, or is that the original?
Nope. This is the one. Yeah, ours hasn't yellowed like some people's, but it has. If you see it in person. But this is the Super Nintendo that we got on Christmas Day in 1991.
Yeah. And as I showed a minute ago, so the controller, now this is a controller from the Super NES Classic, but it's identical to the original controllers. So that is what in the crap is that?
So you'll see many people, you find many SNES controllers out there with these stickers on them. They came inside of Nintendo Power.
And we put one on. Why would we do that? It's a terrible idea. I hate when people put stickers on things. It's just a personal preference, but so that's what sticks out to me first in my head sometimes when I think about the Super Nintendo is just the controller. Obviously, back in the day, right? How did we survive on the NES with only 2 buttons, and the directional pad? So now we've got 4 face buttons and our 2 the L and R buttons, right? So that opened up a lot of possibilities for us in the old gaming world.
The funny thing is, you said 2 buttons, how did we survive? But I don't remember thinking, in the NES days, like, oh, why isn't there another button?
That's because the games were simple, right?
Right.
Attack and jump. Attack and jump. That's all you need to do.
Up and hold up, press B for your sub weapon or whatever, Something.
Or select, start, whatever. Obviously the select start buttons were there. Universally start usually paused the game or confirmed or something. But so there was, I guess, you had maybe more than two buttons, but you're right. We didn't complain, but we had dumb, primitive video game minds, I mean, before that, it was little weird arcade and Atari things. And then you had that home console and you're like, two buttons, that's all I need. Then you had six. Now we got like 12 or
Right.
somebody's got to buy nowadays, the guys buy the pro controllers and they got paddles on the back and they got customizable
Right.
thumbsticks and everything. So just like
But
all in life, we're now spoiled.
Those 6 buttons proved useful later on, especially, we get to like Mortal Kombat 2, Mortal Kombat 2 for the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis. And, remember the Sega version had the blood and the Super
Yeah.
Nintendo did not. Nintendo and their family friendly image did not have blood. It took it out, but it still played way better because you had enough buttons. You need at least 5 buttons for Mortal Kombat, low punch, high punch, low kick, high kick, and block. And the Genesis just had 3 buttons. And I think you had to hit the select button to go back and forth between punches and kicks. Now, Sega did release a 6-button controller.
They did, but there was no shoulder buttons.
No,
It was just 6
no,
face buttons.
right. And most people didn't have that controller. You had to buy it separate. So most people just had the controller that came with their system. So those extra buttons definitely proved useful in a lot of games and sometimes necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. And shoulder buttons obviously stuck around. They proved to be popular because now we've got 2 shoulder buttons, right? Or I should say 2 sets of shoulder buttons. You got shoulders and triggers, as we call them now.
Well,
right?
and the button layout. The button layout is pretty much the same on almost, I guess, Sony's a little bit different, but for the most part, the idea of those 4 face buttons,
Yeah,
that's what we're still
Nintendo,
rocking.
Nintendo definitely pioneered several controllers that have stood. They don't have my favorite controller, but that's another episode. We're going to talk about controllers one of these days and different controllers. So for now, let's talk launch games. I looked it up at some point. I don't have it in front of me right now. I don't know if you remember. There's like 5 launch games. It was like Super Mario World, Pilot Wings, F-Zero, Sim City, and Gradius 3. Am I remembering that right?
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now.
Off the top of my head, baby. Yeah.
You got it. And that's an amazing launch lineup. To be honest, when you think today about sometimes you don't hardly get any games, and we mentioned how the N64 only launched with 2 games. And of course, Mario 64 is one of the greatest games ever, but that was a good set of games to launch with. And they showed the capabilities of the system. Super Mario World was such a leap above, the rest of the Mario games. Added so much stuff with Yoshi and everything. It's a great game, and you use the different buttons, new moves. But F-Zero in particular and Pilot Wings, they showed off the Mode 7, as Nintendo called it, which let the screen rotate in cool ways. You got a 3D effect, with the Mode 7. And so those 2 games really showed that off. I mean, SimCity, I played SimCity a lot. I don't know that that's a system seller.
Shout out to our cousin Jeremy, who apparently claimed that he played SimCity a lot. I don't remember him playing SimCity a lot, but he said he did. So
Me neither.
Kudos to
Me
you.
neither, but he said that. And Gradius 3 is a shooter, which I like shooters, but I don't remember playing
It's
that
like a
at the time or
side-scrolling like
anything.
ship shooter, though, right? Like,
Oh, it is. Yes.
yeah,
And,
I like
and
those
that would have been
games.
very popular in Japan. Gradius is a very popular series in Japan. So if that was also a launch title for the Japanese, I'm sure it sold very well.
Now we only got Mario out of those launch titles, like you said. We got Castlevania for Christmas when we opened it up that day. We had so obviously it was released between launch
which I
and
did
Christmas.
not know that I was getting that because our mom had said you're not going to get anything else if you're spending this kind of money. And when I opened that up, I can't find this. I hate it because it was on tape. We used to record our Christmases, and we have a lot of them. Like I said before, we have the one where we got our NES, but we had the one where I got the SNES as well, and I got Castlevania 4. When I opened it, I was like, Castlevania 4, and I started like doing like jumping jacks or jumping in the air and rolling around on the floor.
Everybody
like a
does jumping jacks for Castlevania,
right? Yeah, and so it's kind of like that video where the kid's like, N64, the crazy video that went viral where the kid got
I was gonna say, trust me, you didn't have the energy of that kid. That kid's off the top, man.
But I was super excited to have it. The funny thing was, I was a Castlevania fan. I mean, I had played Castlevania 2 and 3. on the NES and 1, of course, but, spent a lot of time with those, and remember we had the Versus version of Castlevania at the bowling alley, actually, on the arcade,
Yeah. Yep.
but it wasn't something that I was thinking like, "Ooh, I hope that's one of the games I'm getting,"
Yeah.
but, it was a great game.
Oh,
It's one
it's
of the
awesome.
best 2D side scroll the music, oh, I mean, it's a great game,
It's
and using the
my
whip.
favorite, as we just said earlier, about, some of our favorites in the series being on there. Other than Symphony of the Night, Super Castlevania is my favorite Castlevania game. So,
Right. Well, traditional 2D side scroller, it's probably my favorite. Now, I realize that Rondo of Blood is probably the better game, but I just didn't really play that. A lot of us did until later because it came out on the TurboGrafx CD and no one had that. And not in America, anyways. So, yeah. Now, I probably wouldn't take it if I had to say my favorite Castlevania game. It's going to be Symphony of the Night or one of the DS Castlevanias. Area of Sorrow or whatever, I forget exactly the name exactly, but yeah, 2D side scroller Castlevania, man, it didn't get any better, and when you played some Castlevania games later, not being able to whip your whip all directions like you could
yeah.
in Castlevania 4 was sucked. That was
Yeah.
quite a step backwards there.
I agree. I mean, like you were getting ready to say a minute ago at the whip. Yeah, that's one of the reasons I mean, we loved it so much at the time. First of all, as you just said, rock and soundtrack is what you said a minute ago. And like, yeah, I mean, Castlevania always has a rock and soundtrack, but Super Castlevania had an awesome soundtrack. And then, like you said, so many things. Because once again, like you mentioned, the Super Nintendo was just so head and shoulders. Like the systems nowadays, I mean, obviously they still look better. Don't get me wrong. Our modern day games look incredible, but we don't see those giant leaps like we did. And the Super Nintendo was just such a leap over the NES that
Yeah.
the environments in that game, man, the fights, the swinging, from the whip and being able to swing it and remember we used to just you hold it out in front of you and just whip it
Right.
around. I don't know how well everyone can see my hands, but it just seems so cool. And some of the levels you held onto a ring and just hung there while the
Right,
world
why the whole
rotated.
yeah.
Yeah,
And that's some
around
of that
you and
Mode
everything.
7 effects,
Yeah.
that they talked about, and yeah, we hadn't seen anything like that, and swinging from a chandelier and stuff, and that just
Oh, it was incredible,
an
man.
amazing game. So a great compliment to Super Mario World for us to have on Christmas Day, for sure.
Yeah.
And now, I don't think I could tell you. I mean I could tell you other games we had, but I don't think I could tell you what came next, like what game we got next for the Super Nintendo.
No clue, man.
I don't
because
know.
because honestly, in my head right now, I mean, I'm sure if you start listing them off, they'll start registering in my brain. But like the three that jump out at me right away are Mario, Castlevania, and then of course we talked about last time, Street Fighter that we had
Yeah.
on there. Of course we had Final Fantasy 3/6, Secret of Mana, but other than those, like I don't have a lot of jumping out of me. Chrono Trigger, I guess. Lots of other games that we want to talk about in other episodes. But
Right.
again, I almost feel like we played so many games, but then when I think about the ones we owned, I can't remember that
Well, I
many.
definitely think we borrowed a lot more or traded with our friends, even more than we
Yeah,
did during the NES time frame, I think.
for sure.
And also we're just not, we're not thinking of all of them. We
Yeah.
try to make a list, it'll come back to us.
Oh,
But
dementia.
we can't talk about everything. But let's talk about some of the key things. So one key thing about the Super Nintendo, and this is one of the reasons why I say, it would be my desert island system, was because, me and you both have a love for role playing games,
Mm-hmm.
which mostly came out of Final Fantasy. And we did have Final Fantasy
Mm-hmm.
1 for the NES, but really it started with Final Fantasy 2/4, depending on whether you're using Japanese system or not. You go there in the background, we got Cecil or Cecil. I don't know. Yeah, there we go. Cecil and Kane, the Dragoon.
Yeah, I'm sure it's actually pronounced Cecil, but yes, like we said Cecil when we were kids, and I still say Cecil. This picture was a wonderful wedding present from my friend Jared. So thanks, Jared.
But our love for role playing games started on the SNES, and it had so many great games. We had the Final Fantasies, we had Secret of Mana, we had Chrono Trigger, we had Breath of the Wild, not Breath of the
So,
Wild, Breath of Fire,
well,
Breath
I
of
was
Fire,
going to say,
which we played that. We didn't own that. You borrowed that from Jared Helms, maybe
no,
someone.
Jared, same Jared that gave me my Jared A.
Yeah,
Same one that
too
gave me
many
my
Jareds.
my gifts or my the picture there. So
And
yeah,
there's
Breath of Fire. I'm sure there's more. Did you say Chrono Trigger already? Did you get
yep,
there? I
yep.
lost track of what all you
Final
said because I
Fantasy,
was
Chrono
putting that
Trigger,
picture
Secret
down.
of Mana, Breath of
What's funny is that
Fire.
this Final Fantasy 2/4, if you're Japanese, US numbers, or whatever, is like my favorite, nostalgia wise. I know it's not the objectively best Final Fantasy, but it's my favorite Final Fantasy. And we never owned it.
No,
We only borrowed that game.
no, we only borrowed it, but we did own 3/6, and we did
Yeah.
own Chrono Trigger. We did own Secret of Mana. And we didn't talk about this during our episode about peeking on Christmas presents. Because I guess it wasn't a Christmas present. I think it was a birthday present, but we had bought Secret of Mana. I wanted it for my birthday, but it wasn't quite my birthday yet. So I think my mom said, "Yeah, well, I'll buy it today, but you can't have it until your birthday." And so, of course, we begged her to look at the instruction booklet on the way home, and we looked at the instruction booklet. But I took the game out of the case. My friend Robert was with us, and we were going to take it to his house and play it. And Justin, I don't know why, but he picked up the box. He's like, "Hey, this thing's light. Hey, mom, there's no game in here. Jacob took the game out." So we were talking about Anne, our sister ratted us out. My brother ratted me out right there. I'm not sure why.
I wasn't complicit
He
in
was
that one,
older.
though.
He wasn't. Yeah. But so then what I did was we went in. So she left it in the car, left all the bags from the shopping in the car. We went back in the house and we were going to go to Robert's house. Now, we didn't have our driver's license yet, but he was our neighbor. So when I say neighbor, though, he was about a mile down the road, but we were going to go to his house and spend the night. And we just said we were going to walk there. And so on the way out the door, I got in the car and put a different game in the box so it would still feel heavy and took Secret of Mana out. And we went to Robert's house and we played it all night long.
What a scoundrel. A scoundrel. Now, I was complicit later because he brought it back home and
Right.
still continued to play it before
Right,
Christmas.
'cause,
And
well,
then I played it too.
Mom ended up getting it wrapped. And then, of course,
No,
I
the
couldn't
box.
swap.
She had
Yeah.
wrapped the box,
Well-
not the real game, because the real game wasn't there anymore. So we
But the
couldn't
game
put
that
it
we
back.
put it, yeah, but the game that we put in the box was still in there.
Yeah. What was it?
Which I
Do you
don't-
remember?
I don't know.
What
I
game
don't
did you sacrifice for
Yeah,
a month? Just so
something that
you
we
could-
thought we wouldn't play very often, but amazing game and just part of my love for RPGs. I love RPGs. I love the story and the strategy, and we would go on to continue. And we both still love RPGs. But our love for RPGs started there, so that was a great part of the history of that system. And then later on, the graphics that we got, Donkey Kong Country. A lot of people thought the Super Nintendo was done. We already knew the PlayStation was coming out. Sega had released a CD and the 32X. And then here comes this Donkey Kong Country out of nowhere from Rare, which, Rare had been around for a long time, but a lot of people didn't know of them. And we got a tape in the mail from Nintendo, as many people did, and it kind of showed
Oh,
off this
yeah.
game. And we're just like, "Oh man, we have to have this game." And we mentioned before, our mom reserved this game for us, which we didn't ask her to. I think she just happened to be in the mall and saw some kind of giant marquee that says, "Must have this game." So
Donkey Kong.
she reserved it for us. But that game, it looked amazing then, and I still think it looks pretty good. Obviously, it's dated,
Looks
but
great.
like at the time,
Yeah.
So
The only thing that still sticks out to me now when I look at it, I still think it looks good. Like you said, the only thing is it almost looks like, like Donkey Kong pops off the screen too much or like doesn't mesh with the background,
Right.
whatever. But that's us. It's just like anything else, right? You watched the Star Wars back in the day, and don't get me wrong, I still think the original Star Wars holds up very well, like special effects wise. But same thing. Back then you were like, it's real. They're really in space. And now we're like, nah, obviously I can tell that there's a weird superimposed image there. But
Right.
either way, it still holds up very well, I think.
Now, okay, I've got a couple other things I want to bring up, but I don't want to do all the talking. I feel like I've been
He's a
doing all the
talker.
talking. What else do you got
He's
to
a
say?
talker. Well, I mean, it's probably some of the same things you have to say, but I do want to bring up several of the other games that I think, like I said earlier, but some of my favorite games and some of our favorite series are on the Super Nintendo. So obviously Super Mario World is still one of the best Marios, I think.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
think it's got almost infinite replayability. compared to some other games. Super Metroid is a fan favorite. It's not my favorite Metroid. I do love Metroid Prime the most, but Super Metroid was still awesome, and we played. And it cracks me up because all Metroid games are this way, but like I feel like the first time we played that it took forever. It took forever to beat, but you can beat it in like 2 hours, or something like that. If obviously once you know what you're doing. Also, shout out to our memory is that Super Metroid is the first game that really had the voice that we remembered as being blown away by it in a video game, right? In the opening scene.
Yes.
Yeah. The last Metroid is in captivity or whatever it is. And it was just like, this game just talked, man. It just clear as day. It wasn't like, blah, 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 it wasn't gibberish.
Right. The last Metroid is in captivity. The galaxy is at peace.
Now I don't know if you were with us. We got that game, and on the way home from Bloomington, we stopped at our grandma's house.
Yeah, and you ran to
and we
Daniel's
wanted to
house
play it
to play
immediately. Yes, and we went to our cousin Daniel's house, who lived next door, to play it. And so we were all together there when that started. And the last Metroid, and we just all were like, oh,
yeah, it was mind blowing. Link to the Past, which is my favorite Zelda game still to this day. Honestly. And again, some of that's nostalgia speaking. Of course, I know that, objectively, sometimes games are better. We already mentioned Castlevania. I made a little list here on the side. And then Final Fantasy 2, like we already talked about, Japanese 4, R2, though, still my favorite Final Fantasy. Again, mostly for nostalgic reasons, but I love that stinking game and I play it probably almost yearly. And then I'm going to give an honorable shout out to a game that we loved and played like crazy and that I think is hot garbage now, and that is Star Fox. If you can play Star Fox without getting physically ill, kudos to you, man, because it is just, when that came out on the Super NES Classic and I popped that in, I thought, what am I looking at? There's just a bunch of weird shapes. And I couldn't even keep track. It's just, like I said, it is a game that did not hold up. Like you said earlier about 3D graphics, right?
Right.
About even the Nintendo 64 not holding up as well as the sprites. Obviously, that was the first rudimentary, like, polygon games being thrown at us. And it was just like, I don't know, it's like playing, what's that old game? Like Tank Wars or something like that, where it was like these weird green vector drawn tanks.
Right.
It almost makes me think of that. I mean, it's just so awful.
I think it's great that you mentioned Star Fox. That's one of the things I wanted to talk about. Now, at the time, we were all like, "This is amazing," and we were
absolutely.
like, "This is the future." That's using polygons, not sprites, and it has the FX chip in it. An extra chip inside the cartridge to make this happen. And I remember being blown away about it. And I loved that game and played it a ton. And I was in a contest that they had at GameStop at Softworks Edge or whatever, and got second place, unfortunately. But what I have to laugh about, you say it looked like hot garbage, is, when we got the SNES Classic and I was playing it, and my wife goes, "This game looks terrible."
Yeah.
She's like, "What are you playing?" And I was like, "It's Star Fox, man. It's great." She's like, "No, it looks bad. It looks really bad."
It is bad. Now, in all fairness, if I had continued to play it again on the Classic, I probably would have had fun. But I just, like I said, it took me like 30 seconds to be like, whoa. The frame rate is awful. It drops through the floor.
15 frames per second.
Well, and it's funny, like you said about that FX chip. They made such a big deal about that. And if you look at the statistics, I think, if I'm getting my facts right, that chip alone is more powerful than the entire Super NES. So, I mean, it just tells you the jumps in technology, that they had back then. And amazingly, like you mentioned before, we still only paid probably $59.99 for the game, or $49.99, even though it had some chip in it that was stronger than the system.
I don't even know for sure. I mean, that's one that I asked for my birthday or Christmas or whatever. But that was great. I was going to bring that up. Of course, we kind of mentioned this before, but the Super Scope 6,
yep.
it was like the successor to the Zapper games for the NES. It was like a bazooka that you put on your shoulder and fired. And, it had a packing game that we played, and then it had, what was the game called? I forgot all of a sudden now.
Well, there was Battle Clash.
Clash,
X Zone or something like that.
Yeah,
is one of the others. But Battle Clash was
really
the
cool.
awesome one. Yeah,
yeah. We played that a lot. Unfortunately, we'll talk about that later when we talk about accessories in a different episode. Unfortunately, it wasn't worth your money at the end of the day. Not enough games, but that game was great. Link to the Past, I agree, is one of the best Zelda games. It's probably not my favorite Zelda game, but it's one of the best. Super Metroid's one of the best Metroid games. I mean, just so many game series, even though they didn't necessarily start there. It might have been the second game in the series. I feel like in some ways the greatness started there, because Super Mario World, Super Metroid, they're such a league above. They're Super Punch Out.
Oh
I
yeah,
love
yeah.
Super Punch Out.
Super Punch Out's awesome
That is
for
a great
sure.
game that we played a ton
Well, and
and
again,
really
like we
improved
said,
on the original.
yeah, I mean, like we said, the jump over the NES was so huge that it was hard for us not to be blown away. And then when we say, "Oh, these are the best," the greatness started there. Again, we all have to remember that's our nostalgia and our brains talking. Because your child or my child is gonna be like, that game sucks and it wasn't the best. I mean, occasionally you get a kid who appreciates the old school stuff, but usually they're going to be like, no, this isn't good or whatever. So the greatness started there for us. That's for sure. Yes. Those are the games, was there any other games in your head that you were thinking of? I mean, there's a whole catalog. I could go on lots of other games.
Oh yeah,
but those are the
well,
ones
F-Zero. I love
Yeah.
F-Zero. It's one of my favorite games, and it started on SNES. And I remember our cousin Daniel, we had rented that game, and I was at his house, and we spent all weekend playing it and trying to beat the game. And so great memories there. Mario Paint. Remember Mario Paint?
Oh,
Before
yeah.
we all had, a lot of us didn't have a computer in 1991. And so the ability to do this paint program and make music and people got really elaborate with it, to be honest. There's a little
As they are wont
fly.
to
There's
do.
there's like a little fly game you could,
Yeah.
it's
Swat
interesting,
those
we're
flies.
we're we're talking about maybe the Switch 2, the Joy-Cons might act like a mouse, so we'll see what possibilities came from that. Uh and Mario Kart. We didn't mention Mario Kart. The
Oh
original Mario
yeah.
Kart,
Mario Kart.
Super Mario
Now,
Kart.
we could only play 2 players, but we played a lot of Mario Kart. Man, it's funny because I remember Mario Kart, like, we were good, or at least we thought we were good. But I always used like Yoshi or Toad and stuff like that,
Mhm.
man. And when you came up against somebody who was good with like Bowser or Donkey Kong, they would kick your butt. And I
Right.
remember
They
being
were
so
they were so
mad.
much faster. Well, our neighbor BJ Combs, he was really good at that
Yeah,
game.
he
And he
was.
did use Donkey Kong, I think, and he was really good at it. Yeah, so many great games. We could go on forever and ever about the games, but like Justin said, it was just such a leap forward. We were getting older. We were
Careful.
maturing in
I was
our.
7. I was
Well,
7 years old when we got that
that's true.
system, which
You were
blows my
younger.
mind,
But I'm
to
just
be
thinking though,
honest.
we had the NES, because I had the Atari we talked about, and I played the Atari. But I feel like as far as like we definitely knew how to play video games. We were good at video games. We were reading magazines and
The best.
knowing what was coming forward and all this stuff. And so it was a real highlight for us. And of course, for me, it pretty much it almost finished up my high school, until I went on to college. The N64 came out my senior year of high school. So, high school and junior high, it was SNES. And I remember too, I was going to bring up like, when we started getting towards the end of its life and we were hearing the rumors about the Super Nintendo CD add-on, and we were all
Yeah.
looking forward to that. And of course, you had a Sega CD and it didn't necessarily live up to its promise. We had some good games for it. There were some
We
good
did.
games.
We did, but we had some real
Shining Force CD.
stinkers too.
Uh, but we were excited about the possibility of CD with the Super Nintendo, and then next thing you know, we find out, oh, Nintendo backstabbed Philips or no, I mean Sony, and now it's going to Philips, and then now it's not even happening. And Philips is making its own system, which was the 3DO, and that was crappy. But I mean, that's what gave birth to the PlayStation. If
Oh,
Nintendo had not backstabbed Sony, there's a good chance that the PlayStation would have never happened.
yeah,
It just
maybe.
would have continued to be. But part of the reason Nintendo, now they kind of did Sony dirty, but they backed out of the deal because Sony wanted a lot more control and they wanted a lot more of the money. As we all know, we love Nintendo, but they
Greedy.
are, yes,
Couple of
they are not
greedy old men
necessarily
over
the
there.
model for a company on how to handle relations with other company and licensing and all that kind of stuff. But there's a reason they've been able to survive even when being in third place in the console wars, because they make good games and they control their business. They're very similar to Apple. People compare
Yep.
Apple and Nintendo all the time,
They're the
and how
Apple of
they
the
handle
gaming world
things.
for sure.
So we almost had the Super Nintendo CD made by Sony, but instead we got the PlayStation. And like we said, we were big Final Fantasy fans. Remember, like I was heartbroken when I found out the new Final Fantasy was going to be on this PlayStation system,
I
and
was
not on the
fine
next
because I had a
Nintendo system.
PlayStation, so it was all good.
Yeah, we played that demo of Final Fantasy 7 like how
Oh,
many times?
I don't know, a lot, because again, that was another generational leap. It was just like, holy crap. Now, as you said, some of that stuff didn't hold up as well over time. We both were going there. Scratch my head with my big blocky fingers right there. So yeah, I mean, obviously we could keep going. There's 100 other games, and we will talk about more Super NES stuff, and we'll go back in time too. As we've said before, that this is going to be about gaming, TV, nerd culture, past, present, and future. So I know we jumped ahead to Super Nintendo pretty quick from the NES, but we'll go back in time too. So don't worry, more to come. We also want to do videos on peripherals, like we said, and controllers, add-ons, and heck, even Jacob talked about that little tie-in VHS tape from Nintendo Power about Donkey Kong. I want to talk about some of those tapes. Again, if you guys have anything about the Super NES that sticks out in your brains, or you have other stuff you want us to talk about, let us know in the comments. Give us a shout. Love to hear from you. And in the meantime, guys, thanks for watching. Leave the comments, subscribe. Hit the like button. If you're still watching, you liked it, hit the like button.
Right.
All right. We'll see you guys.
All right. See you next week.